What's up, guys? Ladies. So welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to showcase some modifications and some added leg articulation to my Marvel Legends Lizard Build-A-Figure Wave Lizard Build-A-Figure action figure. So if you guys own this figure, you know that the sculpt is great. This is a really cool figure. It does have its flaws, but one of the biggest flaws is the lack of leg articulation. So he's stuck in that kind of crouching pose, which is a cool pose, but it's unfortunate that he's limited to that pose. Me personally, I'd like to be able to do that pose and have his legs straight or semi-straight, so that way he can do different crouching poses, stand up straight, have more of a neutral kind of pose. So you can see he's not standing perfectly straight up, he's still a little squatted, so he's still a little hunched down, but he comes factory pretty much like this, so you can't really move him from that position. Well, I did a little Dremeling, so I pretty much hollowed out and took away some of the sculpt, so that way he can utilize the double jointed knee. Because he does have the hinge for the double jointed knee, but unfortunately the sculpt hinders it. So first off, you're going to want to get him hot. So you can either boil water, you can use a blow dryer, but you have to get the plastic hot so that way it's soft. So then once it's really soft, you can get either a pick. I have this mini flathead screwdriver, and what I do once it's really hot, well, you'll have the leg disconnected. Once it's hot, you can just fit this bad boy in the back, and this will be super soft. So you can just pop it out, and you're going to do the top and the bottom. So you have to disassemble it completely. Then you just pretty much start having to Dremel away. Now, I didn't film myself Dremeling it away because it was really time consuming. So this, if you don't know what a Dremel is, this is a Dremel. This is a really cheap Dremel I got at Harbor Freight. Maybe I spent $10, maybe even cheaper. So this thing's a really cheap tool. If you have the money, I'd recommend using a real Dremel, going to like Home Depot or Lowe's or like a hardware store and getting a real tool. It's going to be better in the long run, and you'll definitely get your money's worth, especially if you're doing customizing and stuff. Pretty much what you're doing is the sculpt that's hindering it. So there was sculpt that went down to a cross right here. It was like the tattered sculpt. So with the Dremel, I'm pretty much just hollowing it out. Just keep going over it and over and over it, and then I would check it. So then I would assemble it back together, not fully. These holes actually right here, these are the Dremel pieces, different bits, so I could actually fit them through, so I didn't have to reassemble it. Because when you reassemble it, you're going to have to do the same thing. You have to heat it up, so that way you can get the little pins back in there. And then I would check it. So this is at the point I stopped. So you can see he's not fully straight, but I didn't want to take out any more sculpt than I already did. I still want to leave some sculpt in there. So the Dremeling is semi-time consuming. I didn't film me doing it because I had to just keep Dremeling, and then I would kind of put it back together and to see what kind of motion I can get with it. And I didn't want to take too much of the sculpt away because there's really good sculpt right here. Right here I was bummed I had to cut as much as I did because there's some really cool sculpt. But I also want the articulation too, so I had to kind of find an in-between point. Also, you know, I had to drill away on the kneecap a little bit, so I lost some of that like scale sculpt. But once you paint it, you know, it's kind of even hard to tell. And I sanded the inside right here too, so all this I sanded too, that way the paint could bite to it. Same thing with the other leg. You know, this one had some really good sculpt too, but like I said, I had to find an in-between point of articulation and sculpt. So you got to kind of go through the anatomy and kind of see, well, what's hitting what, causing it not to move. So once you find out what's blocking the articulation, you have to slowly take it away. So in this case, it was the sculpt that went across right here. It was parts of the kneecap, part of the back of the calf, and then a little bit in the front of the shin right here. So with the tool, you slowly just start hacking away. Now, this could be time consuming how hard you go at it. Me, I would take a little bit away, I would semi-assemble it together to check. If it needed a little more, just keep going, because the worst thing you want is to go too hard at it and you took too much away. Because I want a good mix of sculpt and articulation. So that's why I stopped where I'm at right here. Like I said, his leg's not completely straight, where he could stand up semi-straight, flat-footed. Like I said, this is a cool pose too. You could still get in that pose, that crouched pose that came in the factory, But, you know, especially with the Build-A-Figure, Spider-Man villain, you want good posability. I also had to do a modification on the disc hinge itself too. I had to add a notch to it because of the way it ratchets inside the whole mechanics of how a disc hinge, like a Marvel Legends disc hinge, works.
I'm in the middle of modding these lizard legs. So you can see it's standing up almost straight compared to where it was stuck like crouched like that. Or is it even actually more crouched? Anyway, so the notch on this little hinge, you can see the little nip is right there. Well, it doesn't match up because it's meant to be bent like that. So there's a couple notches right here. But since I'm making it straight, that doesn't match up, so it's really loose, because that's pretty much like the ratchet. When you feel it, these are the things that's making it stay in place. So with the little push pin, I got a bunch of these little push pins right here. I cut a piece off, I dremeled out a hole, and I super glued it in there, pushed it through. So now you can see there's a bump right there. So that way it's going to stay tight. And I already did it with this one, so it's actually really tight. I don't even think I can do it with one hand.
And then inside right here, inside the cavity, I painted it all green. So at first I wasn't going to do it, and then I decided to do it, and it looks, in my opinion, better. Underneath the pants, this is like his knee and his leg, so when he has it crouched, that looks good. And if you guys are fans of Citadel paint, this Citadel base Castellian green is almost a perfect match to this right here. So that's what I use for the knees. So the kneecap is actually purple underneath, that's just green paint. If you look at the back of the knee, purple. So when I grinded down on the kneecap and the disc hinge a little bit, it exposed the purple. So I threw some of this bad boy on there, and like I said, just about perfect factory match. So after adding the articulation to the legs and then having to repaint them, I decided I'll go a little farther and do just a little bit more paint. So like I said, the Castellian matches factory just about. So then I added this shade, this Athonian camo shade. Now this is like a wash, so it's really watery, so it seeps into all the cracks of the detail. So he's got scales all over his body. So you go over with this. I used a brush like this one. Just go over that and it seeps in. And so that way it makes some of the sculpt pop a little bit more. So this is another Citadel paint called Lauren Forest. So this is a lighter shaded green, and I dry brushed some of the sculpt. So you just get a little bit on your paintbrush, just a little bit, and then you lightly brush it. So that way the sculpt pops just a little bit more. Now it's really subtle. I added it to the whole figure. I did that Athonian camo shade, so it seeps in all the cracks, make those scales pop a little more, and then I dry brush just a little bit of this one on certain areas to help make it pop a little bit more. And I think it looks a lot better. It could even be hard for the camera to pick it up, but in person you can tell, and I think it looks a little nicer. And then this Nuln Oil, so this is a black wash. It's also a shade by Citadel. I added that on some of the muscle tone, and then the cuts on the pants make the sculpt popped a little bit more. Again, very subtle, but I think it's a good subtlety. Especially, I was already in the painting mood, so I added just a little bit more paint on there. And these Games Workshop paints, you can usually get them like at your comic store if you have a local hobby shop. If not, you can get them online. I get them at my local comic shop. So one thing I wanted to get rid of too was all the doo-doo water stains on his jacket and on his sleeves. Now, it was a nice touch, but I thought it was just a little overkill. So I use nail polish remover, and I recommend if you're inexperienced using that kind of product, I recommend not using it at all. You leave it on especially this like pliable plastic rubber material. If you leave it on there too long, it literally eats it. It's literally like acid and it'll eat it. So I definitely wouldn't recommend using it because it has acetone. You can use non-acetone. It just takes a little bit more work. I decided to get rid of some of it. I left some of it on there, like I didn't try to go too hardcore. And then I added, using that Nuln Oil wash and a little bit of white Citadel paint, I kind of hit up the creases and the wrinkles of the jacket, just to give it a little bit of weathered effect. Because yeah, his lab coat's going to be a little weathered, but having all that doo-doo water, like, I don't know, that just didn't really make sense to me. Like, why would his jacket be that fucked up unless he was trekking through the sewers? Which, I mean, he could have been. I don't want my lizard to have a doo-doo water lab coat on. And you might be asking yourself, yo, where's my boy's tongue at? Well, also when I had it heated up, I decided to remove the tongue and add a magnet to the back. So that way, the magnet makes it removable and a little posable. So I can move it side to side and I can take it off. Now you can see the magnet inside his mouth. So I haven't finished completely. I'm going to put a little bit of sculpt in there to kind of hide it, and I have to paint it still. So I'm still trying to figure out what I can do with that to kind of cover up the scales on the back of his mouth. I have an idea that I'm going to use with some Procreate sculpt, also to help hide the magnet too. I'll probably wait till I come up on another head to do that though. So I hope you guys liked this video, and I hope I inspired you or gave you some confidence to try out some modifications for yourself. And see, they're not too hard, just a little time consuming. You just need a little bit of patience, a steady hand, and some imagination, and you can modify, some of the figures that are lacking, and you kind of add to them a little bit. And see, the cool thing about modifying a Build-A-Figure is that if you goof up or you give up or whatever, you can buy the pieces separately. So you can either rebuy the figure for the part, or you can go on the trade pages or on eBay and you could find the part for pretty cheap. Like, I'm going to probably try to find another set of legs and another head and maybe even another coat, just so I can kind of keep modifying a little bit. The next thing I want to do after I finish, after I figure out how to hide the magnet and the back of the throat, I want to grind down these lumps right here. So you see how he has that lump that just rides down? I think that's why he kind of looks more like a dinosaur. So I think if I smooth that out and make this a little more rounded, or not just have that hard edge right there, I think that'll look cool, and he'll look a little more lizard-like. That eye mixed with this like edge right here, I think that's what makes him really look like a dinosaur. So that's something I want to try out too. So I'm going to try to come up on another head. Thank you guys for watching. Check out some of my videos. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time. It's always good to have the best tool. So, I mean, eventually I do want to get a better tool. But this is what I got for now, and it seems to be working. And so until this thing explodes in my hand, or until my wife hooks it up for my